Hello, welcome to Grid Live Pre-Race. Miami Formula One, plenty of drama already, a lot to cover with the Grand Prix of Miami tomorrow. Could be a chaotic first corner. INDYCAR is at Barber Motorsport Park, and the grid ranking leader is leading the field. Alex Palou on the pole. Hello, I'm Joe Samaniego. With me, we got Kobe Lambeth from Grid tonight. It's been a while, Kobe, since we've had you on Grid Live Pre-Race. And of course, the pre-race show rescheduled due to the delays from Formula One. So we encourage everyone, if you're tuning in for the first time, participate in the chat room. We'll love to share your questions, opinions on the air. And of course, big thank you to our Patreon investors, calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. You too can invest in the Grid Network, get your name on the leaderboard. Plus, the Buy Me a Coffee YouTube Super Chat leaderboard as well too. You do a super chat, we'll thank you on the air. Also, buy me a coffee as well. And if we do it while we're not on the air live, the super thanks button, we'll thank you the next time we go on the air. And of course, gridnetworktv.com. Plenty of articles going to be worked on this weekend. Isha's going to be working on F1 Academy, and Matthew with the NASCAR Cup Series recap. Kobe, let's start off with Formula One. Dramatic day at Miami. A wet and wild sprint race. At first, I thought this was going to be very much single file. We had the intermediate tires that everybody was on, wet conditions. It was a damp track despite drying because there was no rain. But then that drying, essentially, it came quickly. So we had a good dry qualifying session, and it came down to Lando Norris, Max Verstappen. Norris took a bit too much curb exiting that final corner after the long straightaway. So it was Max Verstappen taking the pole ahead of Lando Norris. And I think for some people's surprise, Kimi Antonelli just missing out on the front row, split the two McLarens with Oscar Piastri behind. We saw the sprint race, that first corner where Kimi Antonelli had the pole but lost it. When it comes to the sprint, to the Grand Prix, who do you think is going to be leading that first lap?
Well, I really think that Max Verstappen is going to lead the first lap. I don't know if he's going to be able to win the race yet. We'll have to wait till the end of the show when we get to pick a winner, see who I'm going to go with. But it certainly can't go, as bad as the sprint race went for Max Verstappen, because he ended up not scoring any points at all in that race because it was such a chaotic event for him, especially in the pit lane with an unsafe release when he slammed into the Mercedes of Antonelli and lost his front wing there, and then got I believe it was a 10-second time penalty for an unsafe release there in the pits. But it's amazing because this Red Bull car is certainly not the car that it has been in recent years, but still some way, I know I've said this multiple times on the show, Max Verstappen still finds a way to pull a rabbit out of his hat with this car. So it would not surprise me to see him lead into turn one, and there be the race right there with another Max Verstappen victory. But I don't think it's going to be easy for him at all. As you can see, the McLarens are very strong this year. I think Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri could definitely give him a run for his money, and maybe the young Kimi Antonelli as well. I know a lot of people were shocked. You were saying, Joe, that Antonelli won the pole for the sprint race. Just real incredible drive by young Kimi there. And I've been on the record in the past saying I was thinking Mercedes moved them up potentially too soon, since he didn't really show that spectacular form in Formula 2 last year. But our own Joshua Birch proved to be right. They say Prima, struggled with the F2 car last year, and that probably contributed to Kimi's struggles as well. And based on what we've seen so far from him in the very first few race weekends of his F1 career, I think Kimi Antonelli really is truly the real deal. I didn't go with him for pick a winner because I felt like, him, despite him being so extremely talented with enormous upside, I felt like that him being, that young 18 years old, the inexperience up there being racing for the lead, that's why I didn't go with him, because I think he needs to get a little bit more experience under his belt before, I can feel confident picking them for pick a winner. But if Mercedes can, get their cars faster on a more consistent basis, watch out. I think Kimi Antonelli could become a Formula One race winner, soon, possibly as soon as the season.
Yeah, I'm feeling it with Kimi Antonelli this season. I would almost be surprised if he doesn't get a win, because the Mercedes car, it is looking fast. He is really showing how he is progressing, especially with the sprint race. it just seemed like he was able to put that behind him and then focus on qualifying, go out there and be disappointed that he missed out on the pole. That says something. It could have been very easy to just, hey, we got another front towards the front starting position, second row, but he was disappointed. He missed out on the pole. I think Kimi Antonelli has a lot to prove, but the big thing, entering that first corner, oh man, it's going to be very interesting if Max Verstappen can have that good clean start, because we saw if you don't have that clean start, you could be on the outside, and if Lando Norris is on the inside, they enter side by side. I'm thinking we're going to see somebody going wide. Then I'm going to see radio communications. I was pushed wide. Somebody gained a track advantage because they went off the track. I think it could be plenty of chaos. Potentially, you never know if there's contact. Where's Oscar Piastri when this occurs? Where's Kimi Antonelli? They could be the big benefit. If you look at what we saw in the F1 Academy race, when we had Ella Lloyd make that contact entering the first corner, Chloe Chambers, everyone that was on that inside lane, which was essentially second, fourth, sixth, eighth, they all gained plenty of position. So this could be a very chaotic start, Chloe. I cannot wait to see what's going to happen when this lights out. And of course, still potential for rain tomorrow. We're following the forecast. It just seems like the weather system keeps changing, leaving a lot of unpredictable strategy calls and how the drivers will enter the race. Of course, Oscar Piastri will be starting directly behind Lando Norris in that inside lane. He has the points lead right now. Of course, that points lead got a little bit smaller with the sprint race, with Lando Norris taking the win, as you see this points right there. Big thing for Oscar Piastri. He has to finish second if Lando wins to try to keep that points lead. 25 points for the win, 18 points for second place. If he falls to third place and Lando wins, you're going to see a change. Lando Norris knows this too, and some would say has to prove he's still the number one driver. So which driver do you feel has more pressure entering the race? Is it going to be Lando Norris on the pole or Oscar Piastri starting fourth right behind him?
And before I get into that, I just want to respond to what you said about the weather. It wouldn't be Florida without a pop-up shower or thunderstorm in the spring or summertime, right? It just seemed like that this is inevitable to happen. I'm surprised we haven't had to deal with this before. In a few years we've been running at this Miami Autodrome circuit outside the Miami Dolphins' Hard Rock Stadium. But yeah, it would be very interesting if we see rain on race day, a Miami Grand Prix circuit, that traditionally, people haven't always enjoyed watching on TV visually. I would say that people who've been to the track, say the experience is really good, but when watching at home, we really haven't been impressed for the most part. But maybe the rain will, add a little bit of spice to the race, like we saw, today in the sprint race. But getting back to what you were saying, Joe, I should think that Lando Norris has more pressure on him, because for the longest time it seems like McLaren's had two number one drivers with Norris and Piastri, and you could argue for Norris, you could argue for Piastri, say which one is the top dog in the papaya car. But now, Oscar Piastri, he seems to have the momentum on his side. And if McLaren got to a point where they needed to prioritize a driver, I think they would choose Oscar Piastri at this point. So I think Lando Norris has more pressure on him to go out there and try to remind the team, that I'm your number one driver. Yeah, Oscar, is on my level and all of that. But yeah, I'm the guy. I think Lando needs to go out there and prove that. In Miami, you remember 1 year ago we talked about it. Last time I went Formula One race, Joe, that Lando Norris, 1 year ago, this was a special weekend for him because he got his very first career Formula One Grand Prix victory. So, Miami will always have a special place, and it's hard, and there's no other way to, to take the fight to your teammate and go out there and win at the place where you won your first career race just 1 year ago. So I think the pressure is definitely more on Lando than it is Oscar.
I have to agree with you. I think more pressure is on Lando as well. One of the big things I feel so many people have been comparing Oscar Piastri almost to Kimi Räikkönen, how he has short answers, seems cool, calm under pressure. And then I think that sort of gets a little bit into people comparing him to Lando. And, Lando, is he mature enough? Can he be at that level where he doesn't have the pressure? And I think this starts to make it where he feels that pressure. Going out there, outperforming is a great first step. He has to perform on the track, because we know if for some reason Max Verstappen has the lead and Lando appears to be holding up Oscar Piastri, there's going to be people on social media, there's going to be people in the crowd, the commentators talking about, does Papaya Rules have to come in? It's going to be very interesting how Lando Norris handles this race. I think he has more pressure. I almost feel Oscar Piastri, if Lando Norris was to get the win, if he loses the points lead, I think he'll be less phased, rattled by that, compared to if Oscar Piastri finishes ahead of Lando Norris. I think that could get a little bit more on Lando Norris. Kimi Antonelli, though, he just seems so ready to try to get that pole during the qualifying today for the Grand Prix. And overall, Kimi Antonelli, he got the pole in the sprint race. Some would say it was a rookie error. He could have just let Oscar Piastri go, tried to make the switch back, settle down in second place, secure a podium finish. Of course, we know weather, everything, all changed everything. Starting in third place behind Max Verstappen, he's on that outside lane. You got the two McLarens essentially on the inside of you. And George Russell is going to be starting behind him. Do you believe Kimi Antonelli is a contender for the podium, considering you got the two McLarens and Max Verstappen around you?
Joe, I so badly want to say yes, and I hope to be proven wrong, but sadly, I don't think that this year's Miami Grand Prix is going to be the year for Kimi Antonelli to either win the race or get on the podium. I think that will come in due time, as I said, possibly later on this season. But I think, you saw turn one there at the start of the sprint race earlier today. The inexperience there, kind of showed itself there, and that's why I didn't feel confident picking him for the sprint race win. So I think once Kimi continues to get, more races under his belt, he'll become more comfortable racing with the guys up there at the front. And I definitely expect to see him on the podium at some point later on in the season. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe it'll be tomorrow, but I feel confident that it will eventually happen at some point. Such a very talented young driver there. But I think unless something happens to the two McLarens and Max Verstappen, I think George Russell will also give him a great challenge as well. I think unless something happens to those guys, it might be a bit challenging for Kimi to get on the podium.
It's going to be challenging for Kimi to get on the podium. I think George Russell, he seems to be a little bit off during the sprint race, just didn't exactly have that speed. One thing I noticed, the commentators were commenting on how Kimi Antonelli, that corner right after the long straightaway, he seems to get a lot more. And we saw from Verstappen, the McLaren drivers, multiple drivers locking it up in that corner. So that could be a good potential spot. I think more than anything, he just going to need to have a good, clean start. Don't put the pressure, especially like what he learned at the sprint race. If he can settle down in fourth place, maybe even fifth or sixth, he knows he has a fast car. One of the big things, you're not going to have the Ferrari drivers right there. Essentially, you got behind Russell, Carlos Sainz, Alex Albon. You've got a car that could get around it on that long straightaway. Just pace yourself. If he was to fall that far behind, the podium might be out of reach. But if he could keep it in the top four or the top three, and if Mercedes could have great strategy, it's there. But he needs to be sure he puts himself in a good spot with the start of the race. Now, before qualifying, the big thing was the sprint race. And that sprint race started under wet conditions, everyone in the intermediate tires. We had the shake up on that first lap, and then everyone sort of got single file. We didn't see a whole lot. But then the track started drying more. DRS was enabled. We saw Yuki Tsunoda make that first pit stop for the slick tires. Then Lewis Hamilton. And then we started seeing everyone coming in to make those pit stops. This led Oscar Piastri to go into the pit road. As soon as he goes in pit road, Lando Norris inherits the lead. He starts talking about the debris. He sort of wants a caution because he knows that's going to play in his advantage. Dylan comes out. He goes into pits just as Fernando Alonso gets crashed. Liam Lawson make contact. Alonso hits the concrete wall. Done for the day. Here comes the safety car, and this came down to just meters. Lando Norris had to exit pit road, get to that timing line before Oscar Piastri, full speed, on the slicks. He just did that. Got the lead, got the win. But we know if they had no safety car, if it was green flag conditions, very likely Piastri would have gotten around. So I have to ask you, would it be safe to assume if we did not have that safety car come out, Piastri would have won that sprint race?
It's kind of funny that this happened, right? Because we were just talking about, Piastri or Norris being a number one driver. In this case, on a rare occasion, being a number one driver hurt Oscar Piastri in this situation, because when you're the top driver, you're going to get the preferred strategy, and if there's a call to pit, you're going to get called to the pits first, and this will happen with Piastri, and then you saw the incident with Alonso and Liam Lawson there. And then all of a sudden, that was basically the race right there. Sometimes, just the time of the yellow. And then, Lando Norris, ends up, still in one here, as you perfectly put in our script for tonight. But I do believe if the safety car had not been deployed and were able to continue racing, I think Oscar Piastri would have had this one in the bag. And I know a lot of us picked Oscar Piastri to, in our pick a winner. And I'll be honest, Joe, I feel like I got robbed a pick a winner point here by this random caution. I really do feel like all of us who picked Piastri got robbed, because I felt like that this was definitely his race. And if it hadn't been for what happened, I really believe he would have been standing on that top step of the podium in this sprint race. So Lando Norris got lucky in this case. So I guess it pays to be the number two driver in this particular instance, because McLaren could have double stacked him, but they at least had enough respect, for Lando not to put him in jeopardy, losing another position or anything like that. So they decided to call Oscar in first, but no one could have predicted what would have happened between Lawson and Alonso there. So just unfortunate situation for Oscar there, but Lando was the one to benefit from it.
Yeah, Lando benefit from it. I know when that caution came out, the safety car, I was wondering, will they throw a red flag like we've seen in Baku, in Australia? But of course, those were the main Grand Prix, not a sprint race. So pretty much race over. The safety car did pull into pit road, but I mean, really, everyone was just driving from that last corner to this finish line. No passing opportunities. Game over for everyone. Lando Norris taking that sprint win. And of course, one of the big surprises and probably the move of the race was Lewis Hamilton. He said he radioed to the team, I want to come in, make the pit stop. He was the only Ferrari on track because Charles Leclerc crashed before the sprint race started due to the wet weather. So he comes home third in the sprint race. But qualifying, he did not do well. I mean, didn't get into Q3. That podium was a product of him saying, hey, let's come in, switch to the slicks. He also got around Max Verstappen, who made contact with Kimi Antonelli on pit road. Verstappen getting that penalty for unsafe pit release, going from essentially fourth place all the way down to out of the points. That also ruined Antonelli's stop because he had to go around again. So overall, when it comes to Lewis Hamilton, that Ferrari team, which doesn't look like they have the pace. I mean, they're starting behind the Williams. Do you see Lewis in contention to get back into the points position?
I mean, if we get some weather on Sunday for race day, potentially, because just starting P12, you only got 2 more spots to pick up to get into the points. So I think it's certainly doable for Lewis, but I think I think it's safe at this point of the season. Though we have a few race weekends in to ask like what's going on with Lewis Hamilton and his new team at Ferrari, because Charles Leclerc seems like he's on another level right now. Given where Lewis is right now, but Leclerc's been with Ferrari for a long time, so obviously he's familiar with the workings of the team, and they're definitely going to prioritize him, as the top driver there. Lewis is still getting up to speed with the team, but yes, it's been really questionable to see his pace, in some of these races compared to his teammate Charles Leclerc. Be interesting to see if he can get closer to Leclerc over time. But yeah, get back to the question. I think he can certainly get enough points here, whether we have rain or not, because you never know what can happen in these races. We didn't think we were going to get the type of race we saw in the sprint today, so maybe we get another surprise in the Grand Prix.
Yeah, plenty of surprises, especially if the weather turns into rain. In the chat room, Adam says Kimi Antonelli does make the podium tomorrow in Miami. He's the future of F1. 18 years old, I mean, potentially it's just going to be a matter of that start is so critical, especially with all those drivers up towards the front of Max Verstappen, Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris, Kimi Antonelli there, and very few of them are going to give any room entering that first corner. Going to be very excited. Encourage everyone to subscribe, hit the bell icon because we're going to be recapping Formula One tomorrow, as well as INDYCAR, where INDYCAR grid ranking world championship leader Alex Palou winning there. He is driving a special Honda racing development, the Honda everyone's calling, and he's going to be leading the field to green.
Yeah, Alex Palou driving that special livery that Yuki Tsunoda actually tested last year. If you remember him hopping in the car, I don't know if it was that same livery, but a very similar one that Yuki got in when all the Honda drivers got together, on U.S. soil. And Joe, you mentioned the start being very important in Miami, and on another racing series, where the start is starting to become very important in determining the outcome of these races is the NTT IndyCar Series and the Children's of Alabama Indy Grand Prix at Barber Motorsport Park. As you said, we'll have the number one driver in the grid rank and lead the field of green. Alex Palou claimed the pole and end up getting bonus points. And he obviously wants another win. And Scott McLaughlin, his 33s, will be starting second place. We know there have not been many passes on track for the lead since Portland, plus very few cautions on the road courses. So, Joe, given what we've seen so far, I know we'll get a little bit more into the hybrid engine later in this segment, but given what we've seen so far, how important is the start for Palou, McLaughlin, and everyone else?
For Palou, McLaughlin is going to be very crucial to start because the big thing, the starting is going to be pretty much the advantage for Palou. He'll set the pace, he'll go. Scott McLaughlin, make sure you could either A, tuck in behind Alex Palou, safely be in second place, or B, if you're side by side, try to get ahead because as you're entering that first corner, if Palou is side by side, he's going to have that inside lane. I think you're going to have to just be prepared that he's going to exit ahead of you. Don't lose more positions because this track is very hard to win from outside the top 5. We've only seen winners come from, I believe it's 9th and up, but most of the time they're from the front row, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, once the 5th starting position. So it's going to be very critical to have that good, clean start. With that said, for all those drivers, like especially Colton Herta, Will Power in the 2nd row, you're going to have the benefit as everyone's exiting that last corner coming to the green flag. You could get some distance if Will Power or Colton Herta are not exactly side by side. Try to pull away. You could enter that first corner of the race, single file. Maybe the leaders have some issues, and you could gain another position. So really, this is going to be a very critical start for everyone. We have seen in the past, Kobe, a first lap crash a couple of years ago that took out Colton Herta, Joseph Newgarden, and a lot of drivers. So people will want to avoid that. If you're mid-pack, I think you just want to have that clean start and just start focusing on strategy to gain those positions when it comes to the pit stops. Can't really bank on the cautions the way the trends have been looking. Overall, this is going to be a very important start. If you're Alex Palou, you have the best scenario because nobody's ahead of you. You just have to make sure you get enough distance between you and McLaughlin.
Yeah, for sure. I think the start is going to be very important, and you brought up some good points about towards the back of the pack, you just want to stay out of trouble because given how it seems like it's gotten a lot harder to pass since we installed these hybrid engines, track position is going to be really key. So at the same time, you want to make it through the first lap, and get single file so you can focus on strategy in the race itself, as you perfectly said. But at the same time, you need to go out there and you need to get what you can at the start. You need to try to make as many passes as you can because once you get spread out, besides strategy, it might become very difficult to pass. So I think we're at the very start at the front of the field, like Palou and McLaughlin and others starting at front. I hate to say it, but maybe the win could potentially be decided on who gets by out in front and gets that clean air on lap 1. That might just be the case here, but we've seen crazier things happen. Yellow's coming at odd place, and then just shakes up the field. But I think for the front runners, they need to try to get out there, grab the lead as soon as they can, and then just go because You can't count on a caution, especially lately. We've mostly seen a lot of clean IndyCar racing instead of breed cautions. So past history tells us, that probably going to see a relatively, clean race, maybe very few cautions. Maybe we don't get any natural cautions at all. Who really knows? But I do think the start is going to be extremely important. And the last race winner at Long Beach, Kyle Kirkwood, is the only other driver to win this year, and he's starting deep in the pack at 18. His teammate Colton Herta made the Firestone Fast 6. He will start third, hoping for a career best result at Barber. Herta only has 2 top 10 finishes here. His best finish was 8th place last year. Joe, do you think we can see Herta contend for the win? And what will Kirkwood's plan be for the weekend since he's starting so deep in the pack?
Colton Herta definitely has potential to get the win. One thing that was very interesting in the Friday press conference, which we have on our YouTube channel, go check it out. Colton Herta said, "This has been one of my worst tracks. Overall, it's going to be one of those deals where when it comes to Colton Herta, he has to go out there, just run his own race because now he has the great starting position of being third. I like that for him because at the end of the day, he's going to have a clean race. He's not from the back working his way to the front. He has a fast car. Potentially, he could be in winning contention. It's just a matter of the team executing a good race. How will this help Kyle Kirkwood? Well, they could look potentially at what Colton Herta's strategy is going to be for that race weekend. You're going to have the 2 tire compounds. Start looking at potential trends, looking at the setups. A lot of rooms of opportunity for Kyle Kirkwood because some of the drivers ahead of him, Christian Rasmussen. I mean, you got the Santino Ferrucci, Louis Foster. I don't think you can have the pace, Kobe, to go race and stay ahead of him all day long. Kyle Kirkwood could put together a good, clean race. I could see him just working away towards the front. He's going to need help with the pit stop strategy, a caution coming out at the right time for him if he wants to get in the top 6. I think that's going to be a big stretch. But overall, I think the plan is just salvage. Each position is more points. Work your way towards the front. I think that could be a good day for him if he gets a top 10 finish, considering how qualifying went.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that's probably going to be the best bet for Kyle Kirkwood because the deeper you are in the pack, it's going to be a lot harder to get to the front. So I definitely don't think Kyle Kirkwood, would be anyone's pick a winner for this race weekend. The best thing you can do is, try to stay out of trouble, try to execute strategy, gain a few extra position, and just basically points race all day. I know we don't usually start talking about points in the championship as a whole until after the Indianapolis 500, but, what you do in these first few races of the year, it could make the difference at the end of the year when you're looking at the season-long championship. So I think the best thing that number 27 team can do is just run their own race, and try to get as many spots as they possibly can. And as for Colton Herta contending for the win, I think he could certainly be one of the ones, but he's also going to have to go through the likes of Alex Palou and also Scott McLaughlin as well, and also Will Power, who is starting, right alongside Colton Herta on Road 2. So I think it should be quite a competitive race towards the front. And now let's look at some surprises from the Firestone Fast 6. I think it surprised a lot of people to see Dale Coyne Racing's Arenas VK there, and Nolan Siegel from Aero McLaren. Impressively enough, Siegel was the only McLaren driver to make the final round of qualifying. He beat his more experienced teammates Christian Lundgaard and Pato Ward, and VK's interim Barber 16th in the points, and Siegel is 23rd. So, Joy, in your opinion, which driver will have the better finish?
Oh, man. I'm looking at with Nolan Siegel has the equipment with McLaren. No doubt about that. But some of the struggles, I'm just thinking, okay, this is his first full season in such good equipment. Of course, he was with Dale Coyne Racing a little bit last year, got all the attention at the Indy 500, then got into the Aero McLaren seat mid-season. So here he is. I feel he still needs more time before McLaren starts thinking about we need to replace him. I don't think that's a good idea. They got to build confidence in him. This race weekend is going to help that. Get a good, clean finish. Just bring the car home in one piece. I think that'll be a very good goal for him. For Ryan's VK, though, I almost feel like, hey, Dale Coyne Racing, if you could go out there, race hard, potentially put yourself for a podium finish or just stay in the top 5, that is a very good day. I think he'll be thrilled to bring that team because this was a very late deal during the off season. Dale Coyne Race is not known for having the best equipment, the most funding. I could see this being a great opportunity for him, and that's why I lean towards Ryan's VK having the better finish.
Yeah, tomorrow has potential to be a really good day for Delco and Racing. And we know in recent years, they haven't really had many good days trying to rebuild this IndyCar program. And I certainly think Renus VK has the potential to get a good finish here. But I'm actually going to go the opposite and say that Nolan Siegel will get the best finish. And I've talked about Nolan Siegel on our wrap up show before. I've said multiple times that he needs to prove himself. He needs to perform because Aaron McLaren and IndyCar has been kind of like the Red Bull of Formula One. At all the different drivers they've had come and go through the program. Pato O'Ward's the only one that's been standing. The 7 team that Lundgaard is with, and then the 6 team with Siegel. It's just been a revolving door of drivers trying to get the right combination. And Christian Lundgaard, he's coming this year, with a lot of fire. It seems like the partnership between McLaren and Lundgaard, that they've hit it off right from the start, been an amazing hit. And Pato O'Ward, he really hasn't had a teammate to challenge him before, and it seems like Christian Lundgaard might be challenging Pato O'Ward to be that number 1 driver at Arrow McLaren. And then you look at Nolan Siegel, he's not even in the conversation to be the number 1 driver at the team, outside the top 20 in points. And I know last year was a crazy year for Nolan. Starting the year off in Indy next, and then got a few. He had some IndyCar races scheduled for Dale Coyne Racing part time. Then we saw him go to the Indianapolis 500. And failed to qualify, and ends up getting this seat with Arrow McLaren. And last year when he got full time, it was a big struggle for him. Well, a lot of people, you could just say it's just him being a rookie and all of that. And then this year, start off the year, it's also been a struggle. And got to give him credit. We've seen some improvement with him. But, when you drive from McLaren and you're sitting, outside the top 20 in points, that's something that Zach Brown and company are not going to be pleased with. So I think that Nolan Siegel, he needs to have a better finish. I'm going to say that, that he's finally putting things together. And he can. I don't know if he'll end up finishing ahead of his teammates, Christian Lundgaard and Pato O'Ward, but I certainly think Nolan Siegel has potential to have a really decent result in Alabama because he desperately needs this, to prove to the higher up at McLaren that he's deserving of being in this seat. And I know when he got this seat, a lot of people were talking about the funding, that he was bringing to it. But, although you may bring funding at some point, they want to see results. And if you're not showing the results, especially with the iconic brand like McLaren, at some point they're going to move on from you, whether you bring funding or not. And Joe, to your point about Renus VK, I just went back and looked up the data when they actually announced his deal at Dale Coyne Racing, and the date says February 14th, 2025. So only a couple of weeks, before the season started, that they announced Renus VK, because we didn't even. I mean, we saw that he tested during a test last fall at IMS with Dale Coyne Racing, and then kept in touch with them over the offseason, and then they just got the deal done just literally a couple of weeks before the season starts. So late deal's a great qualifying effort. Has to feel like a win for the team. I think if they can at least pull off the top 10, they would feel like a win for that whole team.
That would be a huge win for that team. February, that late. Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, I believe he was the last driver to announce what he. I believe was the last driver announced full time in IndyCar for the season. And usually when you have deals coming together that late, usually doesn't go well. But Renus VK seems to be punching above his weight and doing a lot more than we expected. And also he was with Ed Carpenter Racing for the first several years of his IndyCar career, and it was he was let go late from his seat. So, that's why he got a late start, and there wasn't many rides out there. So he got the best one that he could. And I think if he continues to overachieve in this Dale Coyne seat, he'll probably put himself back on the market, for one of those top seats in IndyCar. Yeah, and talked about some of the feel-good stories from qualifying. Now let's talk about one of the biggest surprises from qualifying, which is Scott Dixon starting deep in the field in 26 after going off track. So because he went off track there and impeded someone's lap, I believe, he had his fastest lap deleted. So it's going to be a big uphill battle for the driver known as the Iceman. Usually we say never count out Scott Dixon in any circumstance. But starting 26 and since 2010, nobody has won from ninth or further back. So given the history of INDYCAR at Barber Motorsports Park, trying to get up there and win, it might just be a fantasy this weekend for Scott Dixon.
Yeah, a win is a fantasy dream. Really is out of reach unless he just times the caution perfectly where he pits, caution, everyone has to pit, he has the advantage. But from that far back, I think he's going to be happy if he could establish a top 10 finish. That would feel like a win, as in the effort's going to take to get there. This has not exactly been a great season for Scott Dixon overall. I mean, still fifth in the points. That's great and all, but of course, your teammates won 2 races. Kyle Kirkwood got the other race win. Not going to get the race win unless just you get lucky, position yourself, because at the end of the day, like we said, if you're in the top 10, there's a good shot you got to win. But if you're fifth or better, you have the best chance of winning. And overall, I just think for Scott Dixon, the best thing to do is just try to salvage, get a good run, be happy with whatever points you can get. Just a tough break in qualifying to go off.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely gonna be an uphill battle for Scott Dixon to try to pull a rabbit out of his hat here. And like you said, Joe, unless it's an interestingly timed caution, probably not going to have an opportunity to win or even get up there on a podium. We've seen time again, when Scott Dixon didn't necessarily have the greatest qualifying day, he still ended up salvaging some points out of the day, making the best out of a bad situation. It would not surprise me if he ends up doing the same here on Sunday. And we also heard a question about the hybrid system during the press conference after YouTube, which you can find on our YouTube channel. The car seemed sluggish on the high-speed corners, and this will be the 7th road or street course race with hybrid engines after tomorrow. And so there'll be 6 ovals and a total of 13 races out at Barber with the hybrid unit. Joe, do you think it's too early to form an opinion on the hybrid unit and how it has affected the on-track product?
I don't think it's too early to make an opinion on the hybrid unit in IndyCar and how it has impacted the races. We've done 13 races. 6 of those, as you mentioned, are ovals. I feel that has a minimum effect just because the oval racing, it's the nature of oval racing. You're going to have more caution, more passes, more passing opportunities because the corners are more sweeping. A lot of different factors compared to the road courses where you have 2 or 3 realistic passing opportunities per lap, certain corners, certain X's of the corner, straightaways. Those create the opportunities compared to an oval, the momentum. You have a rough corner, you could gain somebody. All that sort of is not there when it comes to the road courses. You then look at the road courses since Mid Ohio. Really, Toronto, that street course was the only one that had more cautions than 2, 3. I believe they had 5 cautions. You look at Portland, 1 caution. So far this year, Thermal, 1 caution. And really, Thermal, I know it becomes a what if stuff, but if that first lap was clean, we've seen that corner has caused issues at St. Pete's. That could have been a caution free race, and we potentially be talking about 3 caution free races. Now, I do think it is impacting the road courses a lot. The handling of the cars a little bit different, as they mentioned. The usage compared to just push to pass, it has made a difference. I don't think this is just a matter of, okay, the IndyCar drivers have just been racing, a little bit more with respect or none of that. I mean, I feel overall, IndyCar, we know they got rules where avoidable contact. I don't think the drivers have become less aggressive. I think they're still more aggressive. If anything, more aggressive because they know the way this racing is with the hybrid units, they have to make those jumps early and to start the race or the restarts. So overall, I do think it is having an impact. Some will say it's a negative impact, especially if you're wanting to see more passes. But still, overall, I'm at the level where I'm satisfied because we still have the strategy that could come in. Long Beach, it came down to pit stops, tire management. That's great racing to me. But if somebody just wants that visual of lead changes all the time, drivers on the edge of control, losing it, cautions coming out. This may not exactly be their ideal package, but overall, I think I would give it a fair grade, the hybrid units and the track product.
Yeah, yeah. Since this hybrid units come in, I don't think people have been really impressed with what we've seen on the racetrack before this unit came around. Thing you could easily argue that out of all the open wheel racing series in the world, the IndyCar had some of the best racing. Whether it was on a road course or a street course or an oval, the racing was usually pretty good. And then we introduced this hybrid unit, and then it seems like it's gotten even more difficult to pass. It's always difficult to pass in racing. Mm. Especially um excuse me there, got a little frog in my throat, as I like to say. But where was I? I've lost my train of thought there. But I'll just go on to what Nathan Brown from Indy Star said here, Joe. I don't know if you read the article, but Nathan Brown said in the road or street core races that we've seen so far in the IndyCar hybrid era, we've only seen a total of 2 on track passes for the lead. Just think, Joe, of all the races we've gone with this package, starting in Mid Ohio, then all the road courses we saw at the back end of last year, and the road and street courses we saw at the beginning of this year. We've only had 2 passes for the lead on track, and no, the ones through pit cycles do not count. And Nathan also says that one of them, come in 2 turns into the 110 lap race at Portland last year. So just at the beginning of Portland, that was one of them there, and then the other one, and then also Nathan includes in his article that Alexander Rossi went off on the current hybrid unit on his podcast. I'm just going to read the quote of what Alexander Rossi said. He said, aside from Will Power's rare mistake at the start in St. Pete, he said why there's been no yellows is because no one's driving at 100% anymore. He said everyone's driving at 85 to 90%, trying to kind of conserve tires, but also hit a fuel number because the alternate tire doesn't last long enough to do anything. And Alexander Rossi said this version of IndyCar sucks. He's not interested. He said, I'm sorry, it's not fun to drive or enjoyable to race. And I'm not saying that there can't be good shows or that the race at Long Beach was bad, but he said the fact of the matter is that there are no yellows because no one's trying, and it's wild to him. And Joe, I don't know if you want to react to that, but what do you think of or what Alexander Rossi said about the current state of IndyCar, that the cars are not fun to drive? Oftentimes, you see drivers who, let's say, come over from Formula One because, it's not fun over there anymore, basically for the same reasons.
Yeah.
You're just trying to, trying to save the tires, and hit the right field number so you can come in, change your tires, and move on. That once you get spread out, in Formula One, typically, you have to rely on strategy and all of that. It seems like, in a way, IndyCar is becoming very Formula One like in that situation. You see those F1 drivers want to come over here because they hear out the racing and IndyCar is good. And now, based on the current state of the hybrid system, in this older car, and the car being heavier and the drivers, said are not having fun driving. Like if you're a driver looking to leave Formula One and, have fun racing again, coming over to IndyCar may not seem like a good option because it's like I'm just going to a smaller version of where I just come from.
Yeah, those numbers from Nathan Brown of only 2 lead changes, not counting the pit cycles, that is insane. I mean, that says something of how it has sort of taken away. Now, Alexander Rossi also mentioned there's also the soft tire issues, just way too short. IndyCar has announced some rule changes for the Indy Grand Prix road course race to try to get it where all the drivers are racing harder, but you can only do so much because the thing is, the draw, and I think that's what Alexander Rossi is really talking about, is the IndyCar series. It's such fun cars to drive because unlike Formula One, you don't have the power steering. You don't have a car where it's just perfectly set up. Yeah, it might have handling issues here or there. Where IndyCar, you're fighting for control with this car. And these cars, of course, are nothing like the kart cars back in the 90s where it had even more horsepower and was a beast to handle. These cars are still hard to handle, put on good racing, very competitive race. I mean, we keep hearing about IndyCar's the most competitive series because you almost don't know who's going to win. Last few years, I got to say, you could sort of predict it'll be a Penske, Ganassi, maybe Andretti, depending on how good they are. overall, I just think it's just one of those deals where it feels like it's losing the character a little bit IndyCar lately. The hybrid unit, as good attention as was, especially with hybrid technology, just didn't seem like it was well thought out when it comes to implementing it. Because push to pass, you knew you had just so few seconds. The hybrid unit, it just seems like you could use whenever. The tires, that's another compound as well too, especially this year where the first caution at St. Petersburg, Alex Palou pitted, got rid of them. That ended up being the winning move. And then you saw drivers pitting early at Long Beach to get rid of them if they start on them. That's going to be a big factor tomorrow as well, too. This tire situation, along with the starting position, could be just a race where Alexander Rossi feels like he's not having fun if he sort of everyone's spread out and you can't really do anything.
Yeah, and I also wonder, Joe, like if IndyCar has become, I guess I don't want to say boring or anything like that, but if it's gotten to this point, where the drivers just aren't having fun, anymore at the series, are we gonna start seeing, drivers walk away, from IndyCar? They're gonna like say, hey, Zach Brown, I know you got this factory McLaren hypercar program coming along. They said, so I may want to go hypercar racing instead, and maybe do Indy only, something like that, or in the past, we've seen open wheel drivers want to try out something different, maybe like NASCAR. So maybe IndyCar driver want to go race sports cars. Maybe they want to go race NASCAR or some other form of racing because if you're not having fun doing it, what's really the point in being out there? Because I know you think like being a race car driver is like one of the most fun jobs you can have in the world. Like it doesn't feel like a job that you're just out there having fun driving a car, but Alexander Rossi is speaking from the point. Sounds like he's talking about IndyCar like it's not fun. He said the cars aren't fun to drive, but what I'm getting, he's basically talking about it like it's a job, instead of something fun that he's supposed to enjoy doing.
And you bring up a really good point about drivers potentially walking away. You look at Alexander Rossi, he's won the Indy 500, he's won multiple races. The championship's missing. He went from Andretti to McLaren, lost the ride with McLaren, now is with Ed Carpenter Racing. Not exactly the top level team. I'm almost starting to think I would not be surprised if Alexander Rossi says, hey, I got a deal for hypercar, for Le Mans, sports car racing. This is my next venture. Nice knowing you, IndyCar, and sort of leave. Which will be interesting because I know a lot of people originally thought when he first came in that, he just came from F1. How long will he stick around? And I think he stuck around plenty long to prove he was committed to IndyCar. But if the racing product is not fun, it just feels like a job, or it just feels like, what am I doing here? I could bring my talent to WEC, IMSA, sports car racing, and make a bigger difference. That's a desire, and I would not be surprised if we start hearing rumors of Rossi looking at other options.
Yeah, and I also think it's safe to say that Alexander Rossi is a driver who probably didn't reach his full potential, so to speak, because when he, like you say, first come over here from Formula One, we're thinking, this guy's just, here for the time being. We didn't really know if he was going to be around long term. And I know a lot of drivers were upset with how he reacted when he won his first Indy 500. When he was saving field there at the end, because he admitted at the time that he didn't truly understand. Well, he admitted years after the fact, he didn't really understand, like what Indy meant and all of that, and he wished he could win it again, so he could properly just soak in the month, because a young guy coming out of F1, Rossi, all he knew was F1. He didn't really necessarily pay attention to the Indy 500, and how special of an event that was. So when he won, he was like, I won the Indy 500, like, oh cool, I just won a race. But some of the veterans, were a little disappointed with how he reacted, because he just acted like it was another race. And we all know the Indy 500 is not just another race. It's the greatest spectacle in racing. It's one of the premier crown jewels in the world. I'm sure there's most drivers in this world would hand over every single race win they have at any track in the world. They would hand over all of their championships just to win the Indy 500 once. That's just how special of an event this is. And going back to Rossi's trajectory in IndyCar, like I said, I feel like he didn't really reach his full potential because at one point, when he was at his tenure at Andretti, it seemed like I think it was like around 2019, 2018, 19, 20. It seemed like that he could blossom into a long-term superstar in IndyCar. Basically, we thought Alex Rossi was going to be what Alex Palou is right now. Someone who's out there, a weekly contender, winning races, championships. But for some reason, it seemed like he took a nosedive off a cliff from that top tier form. And the question whether or not he's a top 10 IndyCar driver or not. But yeah, not just Rossi, but looking at other drivers as well. Could they potentially be looking elsewhere outside of the NTT IndyCar series? I know IndyCar has, say they have a new car coming in either like 2027, 2028, and then we saw the Racer.com report come out over the offseason, and when teams saw the rendering of the car, they were not pleased at all with what they saw. So if the teams are not pleased, maybe IndyCar decided to go back to the drawing board, and they said that the rear wing on the back is reminiscent to the F2 rear wing, that big wing that they have on the back, and apparently that wasn't very popular as well. So I think with this next generation of car, the IndyCar has to get this right. They have to get the car lighter. It has to feel like a true open wheel car, because it seems like, given how heavy the car is now, especially with the hybrid unit, it seems like this car has become quite a bit of an anchor, as Alexander Rossi says, kind of taking the fun out of driving an IndyCar.
Yeah, it seems to have taken the fun out of it. And I mean, you're looking at other drivers like Pato Ward. We know people like to see him go to F1. Alex Palou seems to be having fun, but of course he's winning all the time. But what if F1 teams just says, "Hey, do you want to take that next step in your career?" The teams, they got that charter deal now, so it's something where I know some people are mixed on the charter deal, but at the end of the day, somebody wanted to cash out. Was rumors Ed Carpenter was going to do that, walk away, but hopefully sell to another team. Could be really interesting to see what happens with IndyCar and their future. And of course, anytime there's breaking news, especially from IndyCar or Formula One, anywhere in motorsports, Kobe Grid Tonight team every Wednesday right here. Subscribe and hit that bell icon. Of course, if you watch us frequent, you know the next part. The game is pick a winner. Matthew continues to lead. This leaderboard has been updated since the sprint race and Monaco E-Prix. Overall, a couple of changes here and there, but on the leaderboard, the big one, John Bender in 24th. First time on the leaderboard, was on Grid Tonight where he mentioned about his pick, and overall, a lot of racing still. So, Kobe, let's get started off with Formula One, the Miami Grand Prix. Who do you have winning that race?
I think it's gonna be a battle between Max Verstappen and the Red Bull versus the two McLarens, but I'm gonna say Max Verstappen.
I'm gonna go with Oscar Piastri. I think he's gonna have a good, clean start, get around Lando Norris, go out there, get the win. Max Verstappen will be a factor, though. NTT IndyCar Series, of course, Alex Palou, number one driver in the grid ranking, leading the field. Who do you think is going to win at Barber Motorsport Park?
Well, given what we've seen so far on these road and street courses with the hybrid unit, I think that whoever can get ahead on lap one, get that clean air is probably going to end up winning. I'm going to go Alex Palou to win in Alabama.
Alex Palou is looking good. I think I'm going to have to go with Alex Palou too, just because, I mean, he has not been off the podium. I don't see that happening at Barber Motorsport Park where he has won before. Formula E, we had a crazy, eventful first race. Now we're going to have the second race at Monaco. Who do you predict going into the race is going to get that second win?
As I saw in race one, it was Oliver Rowland who won, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. I briefly saw some highlights of race one, so I guess I'll just roll with him getting the sweep in Monaco.
Oh man, I'm not copying it, but I have to say, when Oliver Rowland has now 3 wins out of 6 races in Formula E, I don't see why he can't make the sweep happen at Monaco unless he has a poor qualifying effort. Going to go with Oliver Rowland for Monaco. And I know I shared my pick on Thursday. Overall, Kobe, when it comes to Texas Motor Speedway, who do you have winning?
This may surprise you, but for Texas Motor Speedway, I'm actually going to go with a first-time winner in the Cup Series. I think it'll be a driver who many have been waiting to get his first career win for the last couple of years. I think tomorrow is the day that Ty Gibbs and that number 54 team will pull in the victory lane.
Very strong in qualifying. It'll be interesting to see how Ty does. In the chat room, Adam's going with Lando Norris, Scott McLaughlin, who is now American citizen. A big congratulations to Scott McLaughlin on that dual citizenship. Formula E, Nick Cassidy. So pick a winner. Comment with who you think is going to win. Of course, each picks are locked right as the race start tomorrow, so plenty of time. And of course, you can always find it on social media at Grid Network TV. Use the hashtag pick a winner, Grid Endurance or Grid Ranking. Grid Endurance Performance Index is underway every Wednesday, updated on Grid Tonight. And of course, a big thank you to our Patreon investors, Colin, Shell, Mark, Rob, David, and Matthew, for keeping us on the air, investing in us each and every month. Tomorrow, we're going to recap all the races. Monday, Grid Encore will be on the air. Wednesday, Grid Tonight. Then we're going to be previewing NASCAR, recapping F1 Academy at Miami, and then doing it all over again next weekend when we have INDYCAR, MotoGP, NASCAR, and the Supercar Series are back next weekend. For Kobe, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's edition of Grid Live Pre-Race. We'll see you next time and enjoy the races.